Hey everyone. Wanted to do a quick rant video about fighter safety because this is something everyone's talking about right now after the recent tragic passing of Patrick Day. Of course, earlier this year, we had the tragic passing of Maxim Dadashev and other fighters. We've lost several fighters this year in the sport of boxing. So it seems that this sort of talk becomes all the rage whenever there's a tragedy, and then it kind of dissipates. But it's a subject that I've really been trying to discuss more and more on my show, on my channel, and on my Twitter. For the record, I will be posting an article in The Ring magazine over the next 2 to 3 months, a detailed discussion with industry insiders looking at what we can do, if anything, to make this sport safer. Look, boxing's always going to be a dangerous sport. I mean, that's just the nature of the sport, but there has to be something we can do to make it safer. And I see a lot of videos on on YouTube right now, a lot of tweets and a lot of posts all over social media talking about this. I saw Max Kellerman recently had a video on ESPN talking about bringing back same-day weigh-ins and things like that. The three talking points that pop up over and over when it comes to this are same-day weigh-ins, bigger gloves, and headgear. The problem is all three of those things actually will make the situation worse, not better. So there's a lot of ignorance around this topic. And that's why I wanted to go into quick discussion here. Again, more to come, both in The Ring magazine and on my channel, on my show, The Neutral Corner as well. But let's start right now, real quick, with the headgear and the bigger gloves thing. So a lot of people think that headgear will make professional boxing safer, bigger headgear maybe, bigger gloves. There have been studies done recently, multiple studies, but one recently by the United States military and several other authorities that determined headgear is actually worse. It actually causes more concussions. Think about it this way, guys. I'll put it into simple terms, okay? When you wear headgear, you're creating a bigger target for your opponent. So shots that you would normally slip or dip under suddenly land, and they land in a glancing fashion that pushes your head, knocks your head around. It's the same thing with bigger gloves. Bigger gloves create a bigger target on your fist. So shots that may miss are suddenly connecting, glancing off your opponent's head. So bigger gloves, bigger headgear, just right off the top, it equals a bigger target. So that means you're going to take more blows. You're going to land more, but you're also going to take more. And think about it this way. Which is more detrimental to an athlete? One big knockout blow, like, for example, Deontay Wilder, KO1 Dominic Breazeale earlier this year. That's a highlight reel knockout. It looks really devastating, right? That big one-hitter quitter that puts Breazeale down. Ask yourself this. Which is more devastating to the fighter? A knockout like that, or the sustained beating Maxim Dadashev took earlier this year against a naturally larger fighter who was able to squeeze down to an unnatural weight over, I can't remember, forgive me, if it was 10 or 12 rounds. I want to say it was 12 rounds. I can't remember if it was for a full title or a piece of a title or an eliminator or something like that Maxim Dadashev was fighting in. That is much worse. Obviously, we saw the result of what happened. That is much, much worse. So when you have headgear, when you have bigger gloves, you're able to take more punches. You're able to absorb more punishment because the shot is muffled, if you will. But it's taking 200 muffled shots, if you will. That's so much worse than taking one big flush punch that separates you from your senses momentarily and puts you down for the count. That you recover from much quicker. In fact, Dominic Breazeale, after the knockout loss to Deontay Wilder, he got up from that knockdown, but the ref wisely waved it off. But just minutes later, he was giving interviews and everything like that, and he was fine. He was training not too long after that. It won't affect him long term. And obviously, we saw what happened to Maxim Dadashev. We saw what just happened to Patrick Day just a week ago in Chicago, where he was taking sustained punishment from a heavy-handed fighter in Charles Conwell, who I don't think Charles Conwell is a weight bully or anything like that. He's just a heavy-handed guy. and Patrick Day was knocked down multiple times in that fight. I was ringside for that fight. The last knockdown off that left hook, he was unconscious before he hit the canvas. He was out before he even hit the canvas. That's something I noticed right away. And the back of his head slammed on the canvas. So obviously, taking that kind of punishment over a sustained period of time, that's worse. And that's what's going to happen if you have headgear in professional boxing. It's what's going to happen if you have bigger gloves or you use bigger headgear in sparring. So those things will not solve the problem. In fact, they will make the problem worse, okay? If I could compare this to another sport really quickly. In the NFL, they say it's not the game that breaks down the fighter, it's the practice. It's the continuous reps, rep after rep after rep in practice, going hard, right? That's what wears down football players. That's what causes injuries. It's the same way in boxing. It's the training. It's the 100 or so rounds of sparring that you do preparing for a fight and the hundreds of punches you take in preparation for a fight after fight, year after year. That's what wears a fighter down. Bigger headgear, bigger gloves will only make that worse. All right, guys? So those misconceptions need to go away. They will not make things better. They will only make things worse. So let's knock those out. But here's the big one. Same day weigh-ins. All right? This will make the situation worse. Now, weight cutting, severe dehydration, that is the real issue here. That is what's killing fighters. That is what is damaging fighters. That is what's wearing them down physically, including their brain, literally dehydrating their brain before they get into a ring and take the punishment that ultimately is the quote-unquote death blow that kills them. It's the weight cut that puts them in a position to be seriously injured, okay? And a few years ago, I attended a seminar with the California State Athletic Commission and their chairman, Andy Foster, who's a former combat athlete himself. He's from Georgia, moved out to California, runs that commission, which I think is the finest in the world, not just here in the United States, but I think they do the best job in the world of any commission. I really, really do. And they're very, very busy. They're the busiest commission here in the USA. And in that seminar, they talked about fighter safety, and they had done a study on weight cutting, not just for boxers, but for MMA fighters, and talked about the dangers of that and how that is ultimately injuring athletes. And you guys recently saw the rule that they came out with. I think it was the 15%, I believe it was 15, maybe 20%, can't remember off the top of my head, rule that they had for fighters weighing in, and a fight would be canceled if a fighter weighed in at a certain amount over their scheduled weight, their contracted weight, I should say. So look, that seminar really stuck with me. And from that point on, I've really studied a lot about this. And same day weigh-ins. Again, Max Kellerman just talked about this on his show. Max Kellerman is just out of touch, and he hasn't done the homework. He hasn't talked to the professionals, the experts in the field, which I'm not pretending to be, but I've spoken with them enough times to know same-day weigh-ins will not help. Here's why that needs to go away as well. That misconception needs to go away. First of all, it's never going to happen. We're never going back to same-day weigh-ins. The commissions won't do it. The sanctioning organizations won't do it. The networks won't do it. And the fighters won't have it. But think about from a promotional standpoint with the promoters and the networks. The weigh-in has become big business. For some of these big fights in Vegas, they're charging to go to a weigh-in. And they make thousands of dollars on the weigh-in. But from a network and promotional perspective, it's hype for the fight. Right, you've got the public workouts, you've got the press conference, yeah. But in terms of boxing tradition, the weigh-in has become a big, big deal. It's a show. A lot of times ESPN will stream it live, sometimes on Sports Center or one of those kind of shows if it's a big fight. DAZN streams the weigh-ins. They all stream them now. Every promoter streams them on their social, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or whatever. It's something that fans look forward to. It builds pre-fight hype. A Friday weigh-in for a big Saturday night championship fight has become big business. Thousands of people, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people watch these weigh-ins live. And just look at the streaming numbers. Now, sometimes it's small, it's a few hundred people. But for these really big fights, you guys know what I'm talking about. If it includes Canelo Alvarez, Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao, those sorts of fighters, you're talking hundreds of thousands of viewers, okay? That's big business. So the business of boxing does not want to get rid of the day before weigh-in. It's not going away. But from a science perspective, it just will not happen with the weight drain. You move the weigh-in a little closer to the fight, you're still going to have fighters trying to cut down to an unnatural weight. They're going to try to rehydrate and get back in the ring. Maybe it'll cut down a little bit, but you're still going to have guys trying to get an advantage. Any athlete in any sport will always try to find an advantage. It is in the nature of athletes. And as a former athlete myself, and any of you guys watching who participated in any athletic endeavor, you know this. You try to find any advantage that you can. So moving the time of the weigh-in, not going to help matters. It's just not, okay? And let me compare it to anti-doping, okay? An example that I could give, a comparison. A lot of athletic commissions, state athletic commissions, historically in boxing, would drug test the fighters with a urine test. They take a urine sample, maybe the week of the fight, maybe at some point during fight week around the weigh-in or something, and then the night of the fight. That really didn't help anything. Now some fighters still tested hot because they were stupid and screwed up, but you could essentially do anything year-round, out of camp, during camp, whatever, as long as it was out of your system for the week of the fight. So drug testing during fight week, which is what most athletic commissions do, and again, it's only urine, it doesn't include hair follicle sample testing or blood testing. It's really almost useless. It doesn't fix the problem. Some people still screw up, right? Some people still test positive because they're dumb enough to use something the week of the fight. But for the most part, it doesn't help the problem. Year-round drug testing, now that's different. If you enroll in VADA testing for 3 months or so during the camp of your fight, well, we still don't know what you were doing for the rest of the year, but we know that at least during all of fight camp, up until the night of the fight, you're clean. I'm not talking about the VADA clean testing program where you might be tested once a year or twice a year. I'm talking about contracted VADA testing for a specific fight camp. That means you're getting tested multiple times a week. It's also not just urine testing, but it's blood sample testing as well. So that is truly determining, okay, at least for 3 months or so, we know this guy's clean, at least during fight camp. But that needs to be taken further. We need that sort of testing year-round to make sure these fighters are clean, right? It's the same thing, in my opinion, with weight checks. So I've been talking about this for a few years, but I haven't done a detailed video, so I want to talk about this a little bit. I think right now you have the WBC pre-fight weight checks, which I like. They have multiple weight checks before a contracted fight. They start 30 days out and go from there up until the night of the fight. I like that rule a lot. I think it shows that fighters are cutting weight the right way. That's a good rule. Only the WBC utilizes that practice though. The other groups don't. I like the IBF's 10-pound rehydration rule. Whatever you weigh in at the day before the fight, the next morning you will do a weight check. You cannot gain more than 10 pounds. Now, it's the morning of the fight. So from that weight check, you could still gain weight all day long. If it's a Saturday night fight and you do a weight check at 9 a.m. Saturday, well then you've got from 9 to probably 9, 10 o'clock Saturday night, almost 12 hours or more to continue rehydrating. So it's one of those things that helps, but doesn't exactly solve the rehydration issue if you have a weight bully. But I do like the rule. Again, though, the IBF is the only one that utilizes that procedure. The other sanctioning groups do not. I'd like to see the Association of Boxing Commissions, which is supposed to be kind of set the rules for all of the sanctioning organizations, what they call the unified rules, which everybody follows. I'd like to see them implement something related to year-round weight screening. And I think that It should eventually go down to any ranked fighter. If you want to start with champions, and I'm not talking just world champions, I'm talking intercontinental champions or regional champions, right? These minor titles. If you hold any title in any weight class, you should have to check in once a month, 12 times a year, and you should be within a certain percentage of the weight class which you represent as a champion. Whether, again, world champion or the California state heavyweight champion, whatever it is, you know, the BBBFC welterweight champion, you have to weigh in within a certain percentage of that weight in which you represent with a title. I think that's the professional thing to do. If you're a professional athlete year round, boxing doesn't have a season, it's year round, that's the least you could do. And that would make sure fighters are staying on weight. And if you had a guy who was super tall for his weight class, super tall and long, but was just able to cut down in weight, but he maintained it all year round, well, he's making the sacrifice. So he deserves to fight in that weight class. The question is, what's the magic number? Is it 10%? Is it 15%? I did just some quick math, guys. If you're a bantamweight, obviously the weight limit's 118 pounds. 10% above that is 130 pounds approximately. 15% is 136 pounds. So ask yourself, what should a bantamweight champion, a highly ranked bantamweight, have to weigh year round? Personally, I think it's 130 pounds. I think you should be within 10% of your contracted, or not contracted weight, but the weight at which you hold a title. You should be there all year. So a bantamweight should be able to blow up no higher than 130 pounds. A welterweight should be able to blow up no more than to 162 pounds at any point in the year, or you get stripped. A light heavyweight, 193 pounds. Now maybe some of you feel that's too strict, 10%. Okay, let's go 15%. That means if you're a bantamweight title holder, you can't weigh more than 136. If you're a welterweight title holder, you can't weigh more than 169. If you're a light heavyweight, you can't weigh more than 201. A light heavyweight champion walking around at 200 pounds, that just doesn't sound right to me. That doesn't sound right to me. A welterweight champion walking around as a super middleweight, that doesn't sound right to me. I think 10% is the right number. Yes, it's strict. It's very strict. But it would keep fighters on weight. And guys who are unnaturally cutting down, including guys who are using performance-enhancing drugs to do it, the major performance-enhancing drugs issue, by the way, guys, it has nothing to do with muscle or bulking up. It has to do with cutting weight. I would say damn near 90% of the fighters using performance-enhancing drugs, not just in boxing, but all martial arts, it's actually related to weight cut. Whether you're trying to cut weight in between camps so you can enter camp at a good weight, or you're doing it at the beginning of camp to shed off some of the party pounds, that is what most athletes are doing illegally in the sport. It has little to do with bulking up in muscle. That's more something of the 90s and early 2000s. Right now, it's these designer drugs that help you cut weight. That's what most fighters are doing. But I like the idea of a once a month, every 30 days or so, weight check, and all sanctioning organizations doing this, and it being mandated as a unified rule by the Association of Boxing Commissions. This is something I've been talking about for several years, and I just never really put it out there in a video. So I wanted to get your guys' thoughts. Based on what I've learned from every expert I've talked to, not just people at sanctioning bodies, people with anti-doping groups, people at the state commission level, but fighters themselves, trainers, strength and conditioning coaches, fighters, both retired and current fighters. This is what I've come up with. The best thing we can do, and again, boxing's always going to be a dangerous sport. If you don't want a dangerous sport, go play basketball, some soft sport like that, where maybe you'll sprain a pinky or something. But in boxing, it's always going to be dangerous. But the best thing we could do is monitor the weight cut and the weight bullies. And the way to do that is with year-round weight checks. It's a cheap thing. Fighters have scales at their gym. You could get on a scale, you can weigh in. And if they do it digitally, perhaps that digital weight can be sent through an email or something like that. I think the sanctioning bodies could create an app. Maybe the ABC could create an app. That would cost money. But the WBC just blew, 7 figures on a convention down in Mexico that they're inviting a bunch of people to who don't need to be there. They could take a little bit of that money and develop an app for $10,000 or something like that for fighters to digitally weigh in. That year-round keeps guys honest, keeps them honest. And I think that would go much further for keeping fighters safe. Think about it this way, guys. Say you have a welterweight fighter, right, who's walking around in between fights at 180 pounds, and they shed off 30 plus pounds in camp. The week of the fight, they're killing themselves. They get on the scale. You guys see some of these fighters. There's not an ounce of fat on these guys. There's no fat to give. They weigh in right at 147. They get in the ring and they take a sustained beating. They're taking a lot of punishment. Not only is their body taking punishment, but remember, your body includes your brain. You're going into the fight dehydrated. There's less fluid around your brain to absorb blows. That's going to affect you negatively. But your body has also been through so much trauma, not just all the punches you've taken in camp, but the weight cut. That's severely dehydrating you. And it's not just one day of dehydration. It could be weeks, sometimes months of dehydration with these fighters, especially the ones who are doing it unnaturally and getting some help synthetically. And then they go into a ring and they get knocked down multiple times. They take an ass whooping. Even if it's not an ass whooping, even if it's just a regular fight, boxing's a marathon. 10 rounds, 12. This isn't a 5-round fight like MMA. 12 rounds on your feet. This is a marathon, right? You already have less fluid around your brain, but now you're taking blows to the head on top of it. Guys, that's just a recipe for disaster. That's what we need to stop. We can never stop at 100%, but we could do a better job. And that's why I think year-round weight screening would be the way to go. But if one sanctioning organization adopts it, that doesn't help. We need all of them to adopt it. So again, let me know your guys' thoughts. Where am I off on this? What do I have right? What do I have wrong? Let's get this conversation going. All right, guys, thank you very, very much. Tune into the Neutral Corner Monday and Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. I'll see you at the fights.